Razer recently released their new SnapTap mode on their Razer Huntsman V3 Pro line. If you're unfamiliar with the Huntsman V3 Pro keyboards, they use Razer's analog optical Gen 2 switches, which allows them to utilize features similar to booting such as customizable actuation points as well as rapid trigger. With the latest firmware update, you can now enable SnapTap mode, which enhances responsiveness by prioritizing the latest input between two selected keys without requiring the release of the previous key. This allows for near instant directional changes, making techniques such as counter-strafing more fluid and responsive. So in today's video, I'm going to be unboxing the Huntsman V3 Pro 10 keyless version, going over how to update the firmware, and trying out SnapTap as well so that you guys can get an idea of how it works and whether or not it helps with in-game performance. Shout out to Razer for sending the Huntsman V3 Pro out for review as well as sponsoring this video, but as always, all opinions are my own. So if you haven't seen already, Optimum Tech made a video going over Razer's SnapTap mode, and that video is currently gaining a lot of traction. I highly recommend watching his video if you want the more nuanced details of SnapTap, as well as all of the technology behind it. And it's literally gotten to the point where Wooting themselves made a tweet calling out SnapTap for pretty much being hardware level cheating. And it's gotten to the point where people in Wooting's own subreddit have called upon Wooting to implement SnapTap into Wooting's software. And just 10 hours ago, Wooting created a Twitter poll asking whether or not they should implement last input priority into their Wooting software. So you can really see how Razer is changing the market with SnapTap. And whether or not you believe it's cheating will change from person to person, and we're really going to have to wait and see whether game developers consider this cheating or not. Again, if you want the full extent of what SnapTap can do and what it does for your movement in-game, you can watch Optimum Tech's video, which I will link in the description below. He goes over some really good examples and provides gameplay footage both in Overwatch and CS, where SnapTap seemingly gives you an overwhelming advantage when it comes to pixel-perfect counter-strafing. So with that being said, let's go ahead and unbox the Huntsman V3 Pro. I'll go over how to update the firmware as well as set up SnapTap. Alright guys, getting straight into the unboxing here, you're first introduced with just the keyboard itself. In here you also get a little quick start guide with all of the hotkeys and shortcuts to do the rapid trigger adjustments and profile swapping on the fly. And of course you also get a nice braided USB-C cable as well. This is a USB-C to USB-A cable. And you also get a magnetic wrist rest as well. This is sort of like a hard material. It's not really plushy. It's a hard magnetic wrist rest, and that just snaps onto the bottom of the keyboard. Alright guys, getting into the actual keyboard itself and the build quality, on the top is just a brushed aluminum faceplate. The keyboard itself though is a plastic build. And here is a look at those optical Gen 2 switches. Each switch individually actually has a little stabilizer on it. And here's what the bottom of the board looks like. You have several rubber feet as well as two different levels for the height adjustment. You can either do a 6-degree typing angle or a 9-degree typing angle. And you have your USB-C port on the top left of the keyboard. Okay, so let's get this board plugged in and I'll go over how to update the firmware as well as set up all of the SnapTap settings and customizable actuation and everything else. Here's the keyboard plugged in. You can see that the RGB immediately turns on. Now let's go over how to update the firmware on the Huntsman V3 Pro. All you want to do is follow the link in the description below to this Razer page here with all of the software and firmware updates for all of their Razer peripherals. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go down to keyboard, and then we're going to go down to Huntsman V3 Pro TKL. Obviously, if you have the mini or full size, you're going to choose one of these two. Since I have the TKL here, I'm just going to click on that. And then you can see here the latest firmware. You're going to click the download button next to it, and it's going to download an exe file. So you want to run that exe file that you just downloaded. And as you can see, this window here is going to show up, and you're just going to click next, and it's going to check for any firmware updates. You can see here that it'll tell you your current version that you're on, and then it will tell you the latest version. So if you do need to update, all you need to do is just click on update, and you can see here the RGB on the keyboard turns off, and it's going to flash the firmware update onto your keyboard. Alright guys, so the update just finished, and as you can see here, it says your device has been updated to the latest firmware. Now we can just close out of this program right here, and your keyboard will be on the latest version. After that, you want to make sure that you have Razer Synapse installed. So I'm just going to Google Razer Synapse here, and then click on the first result, and you're just going to download Razer Synapse. So after you have Razer Synapse installed, you just want to run it. So you can see here, I'm starting up Razer Synapse. Now that Razer Synapse is open, you should see all of your Razer peripherals here. And as you can see, here's our Huntsman V3 Pro. We're going to click on that. And then now what I recommend you do is just create a new profile. So click on these three dots, click on add, and it's going to add a new profile. I'm just going to rename mine and call it Jaeky, just like that. And now we can start customizing all of the settings on the Razer Huntsman V3 Pro. So first we're going to go over to actuation. So as you can see here, we can immediately turn on snap tap. So I'm just going to turn snap tap on, and then you can assign different keys for snap tap. For most people, this is going to be the keys that they use for side-to-side strafing. So in most cases, it's going to be A and D. And as you can see, it's already on A and D by default, but you can change these two if you want. And next, we're going to set the rapid trigger and actuation. So I'm just going to click on select all keys. And as you can see now, we can turn on rapid trigger. So I'm just going to turn on rapid trigger, and I'm just going to set it to 0.1. This is going to be up to personal preference. 0.1 might be too sensitive for some people. So it's really up to you to experiment with this. I prefer 0.1, so I'm just going to put it to there and then click on sync settings to all keys. And then for actuation, I like to play on 1 millimeter. So again, I'm just going to put it on 1 millimeter and then sync this to all of my keys. And of course, if you want different rapid trigger settings or customizable actuation for different keys, you can do that as well. For example, if I want my spacebar to be less sensitive, I could change the actuation just for my spacebar, or even just turn off rapid trigger just for the spacebar. And just like that, snap tap is now enabled on our Huntsman V3 Pro. Alright guys, now let's hop in game and I'll show you guys what snap tap does. Alright guys, now that I have Valorant open, I'm going to show you guys what snap tap does, and this is essentially the same for every game like Counter-Strike and Overwatch. So basically what snap tap does is if you're holding down your A key, for example, and you're going left, without letting go of my A key, if I actually press down on my D key, it will override my A input and my character will start moving right. So it basically just prioritizes whichever key is pressed the latest. And what this does is it allows for no overlap between your keys. So before, if you held down A and then you held down D, your character would stand completely still. But with snap tap enabled, this allows for continuous movement, and this basically just gets rid of all of the chance for human error when you are counter strafing. Let me show you guys what this would look like on a keyboard without snap tap, such as the Wooting. So now I have my Wooting 60HE plugged in, and as you can see, if I hold down the A key and then I press my D key, my character will stand completely still when I have these two keys pressed down at the same time. So this is what would happen on a traditional mechanical keyboard without snap tap. So snap tap basically just makes it so that players who are less experienced with counter strafing can pretty much counter strafe perfectly every single time. Now, snap tap isn't as useful in Valorant as it is in Counter-Strike, because in Valorant, counter strafing isn't as essential as it is in Counter-Strike, and the movement in Valorant is less floaty than Counter-Strike. So counter strafing in Valorant isn't as essential, just because when you let go of your movement key in Valorant, your character comes to a stop completely, whereas in CS, there is a little bit of that momentum, which is why counter strafing in CS is a lot more important. Optimum Tech actually goes over all of this in his video, which again, I highly recommend you watch. So yeah guys, when I was using snap tap in Valorant, it wasn't as noticeable, but when I was using it in Counter-Strike, for example, I really noticed that snap tap helped me a lot with my counter strafing, and it felt like my first bullet accuracy got a lot better when I was using it in CS. So you can see here, again, when you hold down D, your character moves right, and then if you hold down A without letting go of D, my character instantly moves left without having to let go of the D key. So in CS, counter strafing is a lot more important, and something like snap tap is a lot more noticeable in a game like this. So you can see here with this dynamic crosshair, if I let go of A without counter strafing, you can see how slowly my crosshair actually retracts. But with snap tap, if I do a counter strafe, it's pretty much instant. With this dynamic crosshair, it pretty much bounces back to being fully accurate extremely fast. And like Optimum Tech showed in his video with a high FPS camera, this snap tap feature enabled compared to even something like the Wooting. The snap tap on the Razer keyboard is several frames faster than the Wooting keyboard. So you can really see how snap tap can sort of give you that competitive edge when it comes to movement such as counter strafing. But yeah, that's pretty much it guys. That was snap tap, Razer's new feature on their Huntsman V3 Pro lineup. Let me know what you guys think about snap tap in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it informative. And if you did, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you in the next one. Peace.